What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Girls with Goals with your host, Stanley. Stop breathing into the microphone. You're very cute. Hi. If you want to be on camera, you got to face the camera. Thank you. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Girls with Goals with your hosts, Anne Catherine.
And Caroline.
And Stanley was here, but he just left, which is all
Dang
upsetting. But not really, because he... for 5 minutes, just breathed into my microphone and proceeded to sit right in front of me and block me, which is really kind of him. Stanley's our dog, and what he does when we're recording at home and he's allowed into the room is he'll sit here for about 5 minutes, and then he'll get fed up, and then he'll whine at the door and bark to be let out because he doesn't want to be in here anymore.
Today, I want to talk about language. Not necessarily in the sense of, languages and learning different languages, but just the concept of language and
being
words.
Intentional about what words you use, what phrases you use, what you speak out into existence. Even in, we're going to talk about, the little details.
Yeah. I don't think we focus on, or it's funny to say talk about because it's literally talking, but I don't think we talk enough about language and how much the vocabulary that we have, the things that we say, the way that we speak really makes a difference in our lives and is so powerful in our lives. One, in the way that we connect with other people and communicate with other people, in the way that it just controls our lives for something that is literally what we all do and what we do 24/7. We're always speaking, we're always writing, we're always having dialogue in whatever our native language is. It's a constant 24/7 thing in our lives, but we don't really talk about the power of it that much. So I think it's something interesting to dive into.
What you say out loud is what's floating around in your head. Because obviously, before you say something, it's in your head. Whether or not you're, thinking about it or, thinking before you speak or not, it comes from your head. So being intentional about the words you use before you say them. Maybe at first, it's it takes effort to be intentional about the words you use, but over time, like anything, you're going to start to just, think in that manner. And it may be a shift from positive speech to or negative speech to positive speech, or it may just be an elevation of your speech. And both are hugely impactful things, I think.
That's actually very true, because speaking just comes so naturally. It's so second nature that we usually don't think before we speak. But we all have different phrases that we say. We all have different ways that we speak, whether it's the speed that you speak at or the tone of voice that you usually use. But you know how sometimes you will fixate on certain words and stuff and you just start saying them without even thinking about them? That's almost the way that you can train yourself to say certain things or widen your vocabulary or whatever it is that you want to do, because you take them on habits so often. Even swearing or not swearing, I'll have phases in my life.
Yeah, but I swear, but it's not I'm not swearing. It's just a word that I'm using.
Exactly. But it'll either be a word that I'm using or a word that I'm not. And I go in and out of waves with it. It's a habit or not.
I say, so my favorite phrase obviously is rise and motherfucking shine. But first off, to type the word motherfucking is really aggressive. Because in my mind, it's not motherfucking. It's just a silly little flavor added to the sentence. So when I type it every morning, clock in rise and MF shine. But obviously I'm reading it as rise and motherfucking shine. And so when we were in LA a few weeks ago, every morning I'd be up in the kitchen because I was working East Coast hours, so 6 a.m. clock into the kitchen, and then people would come upstairs as they do, rise and motherfucking shine. It was like a clock in moment. I kind of loved it. It's wow, we're really making an impact here.
We're really making
And then this morning, so I wake up, I go down to the kitchen. We're at home, my parents' house right now. I make some toast. It's the morning. I'm hungry. Gotta go to the gym. This bread that my mom got from Trader Joe's. It was seeded bread. It's so good. So you know what? I want that right now. I take 2 pieces of toast and put it in the toaster. My dad goes, rise and motherfucking eat a loaf of bread, I guess. I was what in the world? For so many reasons. One, it's 2 pieces of toast. That's the serving size of toast for me.
It's no loaf.
It's no loaf. It's no loaf of bread.
Believe me, I could do perhaps a loaf
if given the opportunity. I'm sure I could.
I could. If someone said, "Could you eat a loaf of bread or not?" Could.
Yeah, I'm sure. Toast it with What do I even like on a piece of toast? Now, you can't, if you're eating a whole loaf, like, you can't be like 17 pieces of avocado toast. It would have to be
you would just kind of
I need like
butter
one
it
strawberry mashed on top.
Pesto it or
Pesto.
I don't know, I'm just thinking.
Pesto bread?
Look, I'm just thinking, okay,
nice.
butter it, jam it.
Jam. But then I was thinking then you would get the like sugar brain.
That would add
headache.
to it, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. We'll have to dissect this further at a later
Anyway,
time.
so using language intentionally to shape one. What I mean by like think before you speak, obviously we're not thinking before we speak. Every time you open your mouth, like you open your mouth a million times a day, you're not thinking the sentence entirely before you say it. You may do that sometimes if you're with a new person or it's like an important sentence that you're saying. You may say the whole thing in your head and like approve it before it comes out of your mouth, even if it's really quickly. But for the most part, you're thinking as you're speaking. It's still coming through your brain and filtering through your brain and coming out of your mouth. Like, it goes through your brain first before it comes out of your mouth, obviously, even if you're not realizing. So the first step in like changing your language is being intentional about it. So maybe you are talking slower, or you are running through sentences in your head, or like being intentional of like, oh, I want to use the word delicious right now to describe this motherfucking loaf of bread. So I'm going to use the word, you know what I mean? So I'm going to use that word in a sentence and like reverse speak right there. But then as you get more comfortable doing that, it's going to just be the way your brain works and operates before it comes out of your mouth. And then you're going to be to that point again where you're not thinking before you're speaking, you're thinking as you're speaking. It's just going to be of that caliber and more intentional. Just that's how you operate.
So why language is so important? Number one, because words are the number one way that we communicate with each other. Obviously, we have body language, facial expressions, whatnot.
Yep, please name one more.
Physical touch, perhaps? Like
I feel
a
like
hug?
that'd be body language. That's not
okay. So not that much more.
That would fall into the, like, body language.
Okay,
probably?
I feel like body language and facial expressions are, like, other ways that we can communicate things. Sign language a little bit, like hands, but that's also...
I feel like that would fall into... language because there's no difference, like language. It's words.
Truth. So words are the number one and very much primary, because I had a hard time thinking of many alternative options, ways that we communicate with each other.
Source, trust me.
Source, because I said so. And that's super interesting because that means a lot of things. That means that words can very easily connect people and communities. It can very easily disconnect people and communities, whether that's like a difference in ideas, a misunderstanding of something that you said, or just some words are very powerful and like have the power with just the word or the phrase themselves to connect or disconnect almost immediately. It also means that what you say and the way that you speak is a very direct representation of you. Like, that is one of the only reflections of you that a lot of people get, is the words that you say. Assuming, because I think most people assume that people mean what they say.
Right.
The words that you say are like a very direct representation of your values and your beliefs, and then also like your character and your mannerisms. And so it means a lot, and we don't really think about it that much because it kind of is on autopilot and it's very second nature the way that we speak. But
which is why it is a representation of your character.
Exactly.
And like your personality and who you are and what your intentions are with something.
Yeah,
but
because it's quite natural. Another reason that it's so important is because what you say truly becomes your life. We're constantly manifesting our lives based on what we think and based on what we say. And so the language that we use to describe our own lives, to describe our own selves, to describe what we're capable of, what we deserve, that becomes our reality because that's what we're manifesting. Like, that becomes your beliefs, the manifestation of your life, the rules that you create for yourself, your thought patterns. That's all derived from the language that you speak, either out loud or even just the ongoing thoughts in your head, because that's kind of language too. I don't know about you, but I got words running in my head all the time.
All the time.
All the time.
Nonstop. It is interesting that, like, think of a time when you've been confident or super secure in the fact that you're going to do something well or succeed. Your language automatically is going to be super positive. If you're talking to someone about like a project you have going on or something you're going to try, or like a competition or whatever it is, and you're super confident, or if you're just excited for like a social event and you're super confident that it's going to go well, your language is going to be like very positive. You're going to naturally use words that are more exciting, like using the word great instead of good, or incredible or fantastic. Like, you're going to use words that are more exciting, more positive, carry more charge to them than just good.
Right? I like how you put that, carry more charge.
But on the other side is when you're going into a social setting, or you have a project or a competition or an event or whatever it may be that you're like not super confident about, your language is going to be neutral or negative. Either harshly, you're just going to say negative things, like it's not going to go well, or your language is just going to be like struggling to be exciting. So you will use words like good or okay, or just like boring and kind of negative words. Not that the word good is negative, but it carries,
it's not very charged.
It carries less excitement with it. But that's just how it happens. So in those times, if you like want to be more confident, you can be intentional about, if you find yourself using boring ass language like okay or good, you can force yourself to use words like incredible or great or ecstatic. And even if it sounds silly, like it'll probably put you in a tiny bit more of a positive energy or positive direction.
Yeah. I really like that you said charge, because I think using words with a more positive charge will make you feel more positive and energize you. Using words with a more negative charge makes you feel more negative. And then you have all these words that are just kind of neutral and monotone. Like, it actually directly affects how you feel. When we're talking about how language manifests your life, using those words that are more positively charged, like, oh my god, that's incredible, this is amazing, look at this awesome thing we did, versus good or whatever, that puts you in a much more positively charged headspace, raises your vibrations a bit if we're talking about manifesting. And like, do you see how that would then have that impact on your life? Like, that's such a small little change, just thinking about the language that you use, that actually has such an impact on your life. Versus also, if you're using more negatively charged words, that literally puts your energy in a lower, more negative category. And then those are the things that you're manifesting too.
You can also use specific words, not just synonyms, because like good versus great example would be synonyms, but you can use words intentionally to shape a situation. So one of my favorite examples is like, it's really easy to start saying sorry a lot. Like, oh, not even in the like, sorry I'm late, but you bump into someone, or you like both reach for the door and you're like, oh, sorry. What do you have to apologize for? You like, just, oops, you both reach for the door, like reset, someone grabs it, move on. Like, it's so easy for the word sorry to just slip out. And that is such a negatively charged word. Not negative, but it's a low vibration. It's a low vibrational word. It like creates an issue where there isn't one a little bit, like reaching for the door at the same time as someone. That's not an issue. That's not a problem. It's just like you both happen to be there at the same time. There's no reason to apologize on either end. So you saying the word sorry is just like even if it's like the tiniest little thing, it's like a little slap in the face.
Yeah.
Or just like a little negative thing. So you don't need to be saying sorry. That, or like, a great example of this is if you're late, being like, oh, sorry, I'm late. Obviously, it's going to slip out.
Yep.
And maybe you were late. Maybe there's something to apologize for. You could instead say, like, thank you for your patience.
Yeah.
It says the same thing, because when you say, sorry, I'm late, what you really mean to say is, like, I apologize, I appreciate you waiting.
Yep.
So saying, like, oh, thank you for your patience, thank you for waiting, blah, blah, blah. You can even say, like, thank you for waiting, traffic was crazy. Like, you could say something like that instead of being like, sorry, I'm late, traffic was crazy, thank you for waiting, traffic's crazy. That not only, like, takes blame out of the equation and takes the negative energy off of you, but it puts a lot of positive energy on the other person. So not only have you taken the negative to neutral, but you've taken the neutral to a positive, and, like, it's crazy. It's exactly where we want to be.
That's one way that I've actually put that in practice. I don't think I'm perfect at, like, not saying sorry anytime in those situations where like a sorry isn't really necessary or due. I also think that if we're talking about a legitimate apology,
that's a different story.
But I also think that when we're talking about a legitimate apology, it usually requires much more than you saying just sorry. Like, I even think in an actual apology standpoint, like, I saw a TikTok recently of a mom talking to her daughter and explaining, we're not saying sorry to say, I feel bad that that happened. We're saying sorry to say that won't happen again, but then you have to follow it up with more positive actions and stuff. So I also just think that a sorry on its own doesn't mean all that much because it's saying, I feel bad about this. You should usually follow that up with like an intentional, like, I will not do that again, and then like follow that up with action. So I even think that sorry in its legitimate scenario is not
also using the word sorry doesn't really doesn't say much. If someone did something that they need to apologize for and all they say is sorry, like, that says nothing, right? Like, you have to use other words. But in an apology or so say you're in like a confrontation or like a heated discussion or like an important discussion with someone, you're naturally going to be so intentional and so aware of your word choice because it is important. Obviously, in your day-to-day life in a social setting, you're not going to be as hyper-focused because that's when you're comfortable enough to think as you speak. Mm-hmm. But your word choice is still important and always will be in whatever context you're in. So it is important to like train yourself to use words intentionally. And of course, it'll become second nature to just swap out the synonyms good to great and now you're positive, or not say sorry when you don't need to, or like use those extra words and like shape situations in that sense. I so naturally now, when it comes to that late scenario, like if I'm late with a group of friends, like, oh, thank you guys so much for waiting. But also in emails, like if I'm late on a work email, I will not say sorry I'm late because I think that is like offering a bad impression of yourself on the other end. I would say, like, I really appreciate your patience here. And then I try to do a really good delivery of whatever it is, you know, instead of being like, sorry, this is late. Like, hey, I appreciate your patience. And then offer a good response or work or whatever. Because things like that, like, obviously you see, so say you get an email and then for the next 5 days you haven't responded, but you're like thinking about the fact that you have to respond, and then you're like, oh my God, it's late. And then you're like, oh, it keeps getting later because I'm like, how am I going to save myself from being late? The other person they didn't send the email for the most part and like wait for your response every single day. If they did, they would send you a follow-up email, right? So that can be applied to like literally any situation, but other people aren't thinking through situations wondering how they can bash you. Well, you think through situations that may have a slight negative effect on you, and you're thinking of all the ways that you can bash yourself for it. And so then when you open with that sort of language choice, you're training them to think about you that way. It brings it down. If they did, okay. And if they didn't, you just told them to think about you in a negative light. It's almost like, and it's a little bit different of a scenario, but when like your mom growing up says, kill them with kindness. I don't know, my mom used to always say that, and it's a Selena Gomez song. Did she? I feel like that's a very typical phrase, and I know that she did. But you don't give people the negative energy or language or anything to fuel anything, even if they have a negative thought of you or a negative connotation. The kill them with kindness is like, you just keep showing up with the positive actions and language and stuff. Like, you kind of have the choice of what you bring to the table, whether that is in your communications with other people or just how you think to yourself or how you show up. Other simple things, because I think the not saying sorry is a really good example of how a small shift in language can be super powerful. I think that there are some very simple words like that carry so much power to them. I think the most basic ones are please and thank you. When you're asking something of somebody, saying please, because for anybody to do anything for somebody else, like, is out of their way. That's not in their natural progression. It shows your appreciation. It shows your acknowledgement that somebody is doing something out of their way for you to say please. Even if it's like a waiter and that's their job. Like, hey, can I please have a water? So simple, but it just shows your respect and your acknowledgement for that person doing something for you. Also, thank you. So simple, but shows that appreciation. So I think those are two that like even so thank you weight. In the sense of like a compliment. I used to be so bad at taking compliments because I like didn't know how to act, and now I just say thank you. And it takes it off of one, it like shows appreciation for them. Like, that's a they just gave you a positive. Now you just gave them a positive. And also it takes the focus off of you and like back to the center. So then you can like actively move on. But I think thank you is a huge one. Also using words like we like being intentional about the word we in a positive way. One, I always, obviously, like, we're twins. Most of the time we're together. Most of the time, or like a lot of the time, we're talking about, if we're in a conversation with someone and talking and they ask a question, the answer is most likely like we.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about an experience of
but
the two
it
of us.
happens, like, being a twin, obviously, like, no one is going to get this unless you're a twin, but I would be alone talking to someone and I would use the word we, and like constantly, like, it literally, I had never used the word I, like, describe myself, because it was always we. No, this was like strange. A huge thing. I literally couldn't use the word I. It felt so unnatural and so weird, even though you're like in a setting where you're not there. Like, Caroline wasn't there in these settings if someone was talking to me. And then, like, using the word we, and it was people who didn't even know I had a twin at that point. I was like, what? Like, it used to happen all the time, and I couldn't break it, and it was so annoying, because I was like,
I'm sure physically, I do it too sometimes without realizing it. Physically,
that's like conditioning yourself further to be like, oh, you're not an independent person. But things like that. Or last night I was on FaceTime with one of my friends, like, trying to tell him how to cook chicken, because I made it a couple weeks ago and it was good and he wanted to remake it. It's like trying to cook it. And at first I was using the word, you should check the chicken now. And then it turned into like, oh, we should take the chicken off. Like, I'm not even there. I'm literally on the phone. I was like, we should put the mushrooms on now. Like, we should do this. We should do this. We should do this. And it made it so much better. Because at first it was like, oh, I'm away from the situation. I'm telling you what to do. I was like, I'd so much rather be there. And then it's like, this was a fully intentional switch that I made. And I started using the word we. And then it became so, not that it wasn't fun before, but it was like such a fun experience for me, even though I was on the phone.
Yeah.
I was like, we. Like, we should put the mushrooms in now. Like, we should eat outside because, like, our other friends outside. I was like, hey, I'm like literally on the phone, not even there at all. But using the word we intentionally is like community building. Or
I
at
really
work,
like that. It makes people feel accepted if you can, like, include them in something.
Or at work, if I'm like upset and don't want to be there, I will use the word like you or like the company. But if I'm having a good day and I'm part of the team, like, I will use the word we. And I'm so intentional about it. But things like that. I don't know. There are other words. Obviously, you use your own specific words in your own life and like have your own classic words, or most impactful words, and so it's gonna be different for everyone. And we're using the word I, we, please, thank you, because they're the most basic that we know everyone is gonna use, but you can apply this to so many different situations in your life.
Also, addressing somebody by their name. When somebody uses my name with me, like, I feel so much more included, accepted. I don't really know. It just feels so much better than if somebody just speaks to you or speaks at you. For them to say your name and, like, acknowledge your name.
Say my name.
Is so nice. And also, like, in a group conversation when they're referring to you and you're in a group and someone's like, oh, she just did, like, oh, Caroline did that, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's so different. It's such a small change, but it's
it
so
also
different.
Like, low-key makes you feel human. It like makes you feel like you exist if someone uses your name, because you're like, oh, that's true. Like, you other people perceive me like I do exist. That's crazy.
That's actually true. I don't think we use other people's names.
We do not use other people's names enough.
That, like, it just, we're going with the flow, and then you use someone's name and it's almost like this shock of a system.
Yeah. Or I'll, like, be so not actively using people's names that, like, even at work, I will go to say, like, my manager's name and I'm like, was that the right name? Like, did I get that right? Like, truly. And I'm like, I know your name, but I just I haven't used it in a while. It's the weirdest thing. But I do like, one, using people's names because I know how it makes people feel. And two, like, when people use my name. Because that's also another thing. I'm like, I could walk up to someone that I have met 10 times before and, like, just assume that they don't know who I am. And so when someone uses my name, I'm like, oh my, like, you know who I, like, you know my name, you know who I am. It's crazy. That's also just a me thing, because I'm genuinely convinced that, like, people don't know who I am. Like, I could see someone 10 seconds earlier and then, like, turn around, bump into them again and just assume that they don't know who I am, or, like, they forgot what I look like, or, like, don't actually know. And I'm like, what? That's so, like, someone needs to figure that out for me. But it is nice to, like, know that people know who you are, and that's why you should be intentional about using people's names. Make it natural.
The difference between bumping into someone and being like, hey, how are you? Versus like, oh my god, hey, Catherine, how are you? So different and so simple. It's crazy. I think the biggest changes, or the most powerful changes in your language are usually the smallest ones like that. It's not necessarily using the big words all the time. Like, I think there's a lot of people who think that using all of the biggest words in the dictionary in the same sentence are the ones that are going to make what they're saying most powerful. Most of the time that just makes them look like an idiot because they're using the words wrong. And if you can use all the words right, more power to you. Usually they're not
even when
necessary.
even when you're using the words right, it's like, what are you doing?
necessary
Can we have
in
a
that
functioning
sense,
conversation?
you know?
You're
So-
saying too many syllables right now. Like, I would just, you know,
Right. So there's huge power in like having an expanded vocabulary and being smart about the language that you're using.
that's different than just being irritating.
But I think that the most powerful changes are those really small ones and the ones that we've described. And I think it's so cool to think about because we usually don't think about those things. They're such small little things. Another one of the most powerful things is, you know, when you're in a conversation with somebody and you may be in a group setting and someone's talking and you're listening to their story and then all of a sudden they get cut off and somebody else is talking and they were like mid-story, they get cut off, they probably think they're not going to come back to it. And you turn to that person and you're like, so what were you saying about that?
To be selfish right now, I do that. Or if someone is in a group, like, because I know it when it happens to me, like, no one comes back and, right? Or, like, if someone starts talking over me, I know that no one is gonna continue to pay attention. So when that happens to other people, I'm so intentional about, like, my eye contact, it, like, locked and loaded, it's not changing. If we're in a group of, like, 6 people and one person's telling a story and I'm listening and 4 other people start talking about another story, I don't care what they're talking about. Like, I will continue to listen to your story. Even if I do not care and want to listen to what the other 4 people are talking about, like, I will not move my eye contact from you. Like, I'm listening. I'm going to ride this ride to the end. Like, we're finishing this story and you're not going to get your feelings hurt right now. Or if the conversation changes, like, I will make sure to, like, bring it back to the other person or be like, I'm still listening, or ask a question to, like, re-engage the conversation.
Yeah. Small thing, but makes such a huge difference in how somebody feels. Whether they feel like they were just spoken over and nobody cares, or whether they're like, oh, she was actually listening. She asked me to finish that story. Huge difference.
That also comes with confidence, too. Like, I'm thinking about all of these, and I'm thinking, like, 4 or 5 years ago, I probably wouldn't have done that because I would be in the same, like, oh, I'm just here in this group. Like, I'm not, no one wants me to be listening, right? Type of thing. So, like, I'm not going to continue. So, but with confidence, you're more empowered to make that decision to be like, I'm still listening. Like, I'm still here. Like, I'm focused on you. I don't really care what else is going on. Like, I care about what you have to say right now. That comes with confidence. Using words intentionally not only does it come with confidence, but it, like, breeds confidence too. So, like, the more confident you are in yourself, the easier it's going to be to use words intentionally and, like, not say sorry. Mm-hmm. At the same time, like we're saying, it's so impactful in the reverse direction that when you pull up late and you're like, oh, thank you for waiting, so much power to you. Yes, it gives power back to them, like, it gives positivity back to them, but it also gives power back to you. Like, we're right foot forward in that setting. Like, it takes confidence to get comfortable with using words intentionally, but it also will boost your confidence and, like, boost your way of living way higher when you actually do take this into consideration.
I read in a book, it's been a long time since I've mentioned the book The Mountain Is You, but I'm going to bring it back because one thing that I read in that book, it was talking about all the different ways that we self-sabotage, but one of the ways that they said we self-sabotage is by judging other people, and that has really, really stuck to me, the concept that the judgments that we place on other people become the rules that we force ourselves to play by, because the more that we're judging other people for something, we're saying, I can never be like that, I can never do that, blah, 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 and it's just breeding negativity and rules in your own life. So trying to use less judgmental language towards how we speak about other people and how you think about other people. And, like, yes, we all love a little bit of gossip sometimes. We all love a little bit of bashing people that we're frustrated with or we don't agree with sometimes. Like, I'm not saying we all have to be perfect. That's totally a part of life. But trying to not as regularly use judgmental language towards other people just for the sake of being judgmental is super powerful, not only in, like, those connections and relationships, but also on yourself, because all of those judgments and those words that you use towards other people become those rules that you have to play by yourself. Similarly, try to reflect confidence in the way that you speak. I think a lot of us are hardwired to be very self-deprecating in the way that we speak. We don't necessarily want to hype ourselves up or it feels a little bit uncomfortable to speak about ourselves with confidence. And that also comes with practice, because I feel like we talk about ourselves so confidently now. Like, I would not often be self-deprecating.
Well, it's not like that's what I'm saying. It's like, when you're not confident, it's like you have to go, it's like almost going overboard in the other direction, like self-deprecating jokes and all of that, going overboard, because it's almost like a hurt yourself before they hurt you, or like make the joke before they make it about you type situation, which is just so fucked up and not ever what someone wants to like be a part of. But as you become more confident, it's not like cockiness or speaking about yourself, or like going overboard, or like being not humble. It's just naturally the language you use is gonna come with confidence, and confidence is not a negative thing. As we've said so many times, our confidence is just like a foundational structure. And when you are confident, it's obviously going to come out in your language. And especially when you talk about yourself, not in the sense of when you open your mouth to talk about yourself, it's going to be like abundantly, I'm the best, I'm great. No, it's just going to be a lack of self-deprecating jokes. It's going to be like, even if it is you're talking about a negative thing, it's like, oh no, yeah, I made a mistake, I learned this. Like, you're going to use that language rather than like, oh, I fucked up, I'm such a failure.
Yeah. Because we've all been in situations where people are very self-deprecating, like around some people who are just always self-deprecating in the way that they speak.
Like, can you please shut up?
And it makes you very uncomfortable, and it's very, very draining. And when I say that, there's a hugely distinct difference between somebody actually struggling with something and having a conversation about that, and like acknowledging like, hey, I'm really struggling with this, and talking about their feelings, versus somebody who is just speaking about themselves in a self-deprecating manner no matter what. Like, you're getting ready to go out and it's just, oh, I look so bad, my hair is so gross, this outfit, I look so fat in this outfit, all this. Like, some people, that's just like the way that they speak about themselves all the time. And I'm not necessarily talking about when someone is like, I'm really struggling. Like, I'm really struggling with this. That's different. But it's so draining to be around people who speak like that, and also to speak like that yourself.
Because if someone is actually struggling with something, or if it's like a real thing, even if someone puts on a dress and they're like, oh my god, like I really don't like the way I look, like I'm sad, cancel the plans, like we're talking, like, you know what I mean, I'm involved. But if someone is sitting there and is like, oh, I'm so fat, like blah blah blah, like in an annoying way, and it's a constant thing, and like they don't actually mean it, but they mean it and they're saying it, so blah blah blah, oh my god, can we, like, it's so pointless. It's just very energy draining for everyone involved. But it's typically a lot easier to point out those negatives than to be like, I look so hot right now, I'm so excited to go out. Even though that's way more fun and that's way more energizing to say. But that is just another huge way that language changes our lives and is so powerful, the way that we speak about ourselves. The way that we speak about ourselves around other people as well. Whether you're being self-deprecating or whether you're reflecting confidence in the way that you talk about yourself. Huge difference, and is, again, just another habit, just another way that you can train yourself to speak, just like Catherine said. So, after you listen to this episode, I hope that you, one, just like become more aware of how you're speaking, and two, try and implement some of these things and be more intentional about the way you're speaking and see how it affects you, how it impacts you, and how it maybe hopefully is a change for good. Thank you guys so much for listening. We appreciate you listening to every single episode and love hanging out with you guys every week. If you want merch, which is the perfect merch for the summer, if I don't say so myself, it's very beachy and bright and energizing. That's linked below. And you can also find more podcast content and more personal, like literally in our lives content on at Girls Schools Pod, TikTok, Instagram, at Catherine Canine, at Karen Canine. Also all linked below. And we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.